Hello, everybody. My name is Sergej. I'm the Chief Security Officer for Central Europe at Palo Alto Networks. And today I have with me Rishi Bhargava, who is the co-founder of Demisto and the VP for Product Strategy at Palo Alto Networks. So Rishi, thanks for being here.
Of course, very happy to be here.
So Rishi, I think security automation, specifically within the operational field, is not a new topic, right? I mean, we know from the interagencies that they've been using this trick already for a while, right? Having always like not just an analyst, but also a developer sitting in the SOC and then trying to automate every step that analysts would do, and then swap this roles, around. So, as a founder of Demisto, what was your inspiration and vision how SOAR should be adapted by the SOCs of this world?
Yeah, so that's actually a very interesting analogy, Sergej, which is if you see the automation, it's not that people had not been doing automation in the SOC, it's been there. But what was interesting was the automation, since it was being done by writing code and actually developing some scripts, it was available to only very advanced organizations. I mean, intel agencies would do it, advanced organizations would do it. The goal of SOAR, and when we started, was to how do you make the analyst happier and reduce their burden? And that you could do is by bringing the technologies and the playbook and automation to them without them having to spend significant amount of time or having to know code. Can they still automate their work without having to go spend hours and hours of learning programming languages or developing code? And that was the biggest piece.
How to make automation more comfortable and more easy to use for the SOCs, right?
Exactly. So kind of the catchword is, can you democratize? Can you bring that automation to every SOC and make it easy for them to automate their workflows? Right. So that's I think was the core. It's interesting. What was your experience running the cybersecurity at FIS? I mean, did you see this happening?
Well, I think the SOC was always the center of gravity as well within the financial industry, and typically you've got very large SOCs in the financial industry space, up to 200 people, 300 people sometimes, who are very influential as well in the company and who would be very large because of so much regulation, so much demand, to generate certain visibility aspects, certain reports, and so on. But effectively looking at this setup of manual processes, you also recognize that it's first of all a big impact on the cost posture of the security of every security team, right? And secondly, it's also increasing the risk as well of the operational processes because, of course, if you have a human in between, things are getting forgotten or things are not done perfectly, right? And people are very slow as well compared to machine. I think that was really one of the biggest challenges where SOC can significantly change the game, how this aspect of SOCs is being seen today. And I think perhaps, question back to you as well, with the adoption of SOAR technologies, which we see quite heavily and quite fast being adopted as well by the market, what is going to be the role of the traditional technologies which were used by the SOCs in the past, like the SIM systems, for instance? Any thought about that?
A fantastic question. Again, I don't have a crystal ball, but if I kind of look at the functions that a SOC performed, there was one piece which is large amounts of security data being aggregated, whether it may be for compliance reasons or security reasons. That's going to happen. So you do need a log store, a data store for security data. And that you need it whether you have a SOAR or you don't have a SOAR. Second piece is, I do not think that the role of analytics is disappearing. Now, of course, there is a lot of opinions and a lot of conversations whether SIM were able to deliver the promise of analytics, were they able to deliver on the promise of detection. Not going to comment on that, but the point is, I think there is a clear gap in how much an analytics can do to reduce the burden and what needs to be looked at. So there will be a role of analytics, whether it's SIM, whether there's some other category, whether it's partially delivered by SOAR and then rest delivered by other categories like EDR and NTA expanding into that market, yet to be seen. But there is a role of analytics. The role of SOAR actually is when you get an alert, how do you go respond to that? Or how do you further enrich that is where SOAR plays in. And in fact, I think in long run, SOAR will go outside of the SOC use cases, which is all security use cases. Why would you not start to automate security use cases around compliance if you already have an automation platform?
Right. Good point. So I think, in this game of automation, we see a lot of this marketing hype around, hey, the attackers are starting to use machine learning, and they're really at this automation pace since 2 or 3 years. But effectively, I've looked up in our systems, we see even very, very old threats and old malware, like Configure, for instance, which is malware which was introduced like 11 years ago or so, and which was already using a lot of automation. We still see like hundreds of infections per day. In fact, looking, coming from the financial industry, looking at banking malware, we had already what we call automated transfer systems. So system which would not just steal the credentials, but also users' credentials to log in automatically to banks and, based on the GUI, perform the transactions. So we had already a high portion of automation years ago, right? So it's not a new topic for attackers to automate. It's the bread and butter. So where do you see right now, defenders versus attackers in terms of this game of automation?
So I think that just makes the point that automating and orchestrating from a defender perspective is as much more important. I think you're absolutely right that attackers have always been automating different aspects. If you look at it, the reality is the odds are in their favor. They only need to succeed once. They can automate a whole lot of pieces and find that one vulnerability to get in. And we need to protect every time. So I don't know if there is an answer who's going to win here. I don't think that's the point. The point is, I think there are two things. One, how can we automate more and more so that the cost for the attacker to find that one attack goes up? And if you make that cost high enough, then their incentive to be able to break in goes down. So that's one aspect to look at it as the lever to say is like, how do we protect more and more surface? And the second piece is, even if they're able to break in, how do you reduce that mean time to respond and the risk exposure significantly? And it's in fact, my biggest argument for the CISOs and the security leaders out there is automate to reduce your risk, because your exposure goes down if you're able to close that attack right away, rather than the cost reduction. Of course, there's cost reduction, but the real big thing is your risk exposure goes down significantly.
Great. So automation is a really fancy topic right now, right? And I think I have to ask this question. In this years of working on this product and seeing a lot of SOCs, a lot of potentially also IT teams using automation, what is your favorite use case, what was automated, right? What is the most funniest use case you've ever seen?
There's actually a couple. We actually recently did a webinar with a whole bunch of unexpected use cases. The funniest one was one of our sales engineer took our automation platform and automated the wedding invites. And so he actually had a whole bunch of people he wanted to invite. When did they accept? What did they accept? What were their meal preferences? And there's systems out there, but they're not custom enough. They're not interesting enough to collect all this data, aggregate that into an Excel spreadsheet. For an engineer at heart, he actually wrote a playbook to automate his wedding. There's a fun blog out there. That's kind of the fun one. But I think in security, it's also important to see, even in security, I encourage people to think like, if you're doing anything twice or thrice, automate it. And a good one, which is so common, and I've seen only some customers do it, not others, is the impossible traveler problem. Or if you log in from one place and then next day you log in from China, are you actually in China or are you actually in a different country? And people integrated with their travel management systems to find whether, when you get an alert from a VPN that Sergej is in this particular country, they just go to the travel management system. Hey, did he book travel? Is he there? Let's enrich the alert. And that's actually powerful. You reduce a lot of this manual work there. So there's some really powerful use cases. The point is, in the world today, where there is APIs for systems, you can almost automate everything, including the wedding.
What comes into my mind is also that you can use it much more better for delegated monitoring. So, instead of looking at this VPN alert yourself, you just delegate this to the user immediately and ask him to validate if he was really traveling or not, right? So that's an exciting. Great. Thanks for being here and thanks for watching.